Welcome back to another edition of the Saturday to Sunday Football Podcast. I am Paul Perticchese, and thank you for joining me. As always, another week of college football in the books. 12 weeks already completed. We are heading into the Thanksgiving week, championship week right around the corner. We'll start talking about playoffs. NFL Week 11 concluding tonight with the arguably the best regular season game of the year on paper. Rematch Super Bowl, Philadelphia Eagles, Kansas City Chiefs. Going to be a fun one tonight on Monday Night Football as well. Set to kick off about a half hour from me recording this podcast. So let's jump right into it with the NFL draft report for this week. A lot of things we want to talk about, but let's start at the top with our SS teams of the week, our first string, second string teams of the week. And then we'll have other things that really we want to talk about. Because now at this point, it's going to be checking in on the big names, the big storylines, injuries, a lot of stuff to talk about. So let's get right into the SS first string team of the week. At the quarterback position, Carson Beck out of Georgia, 298 yards and 3 touchdowns in the easy victory for Georgia over Tennessee. First string running back of the week, Travion Henderson out of Ohio State, 146 yards, 2 touchdowns in an easy win for Ohio State over Minnesota, leading up to the big game this week against Michigan. First string wide receiver of the week, Odunze, 7 catches, 106 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Washington had a close victory over Oregon State. And the first string tight end of the week, new name to the mix, out of TCU, senior. He's 6'7", 260 pounds. Jared Wiley had 7 catches, 178 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And it wasn't just one fluky game. He's got a stat line this year of 39 catches, 481 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Impressive performance from Jared Wiley this past weekend, a guy that I think is, even with the, the additions now with juniors going to the, potentially being invited to the All-Star games, Jared Wiley's putting a season together at his body type, at his frame, and his production. We're going to see him at one of the All-Star games. I believe that. So Jared Wiley, a guy that I have not had eyes on, excited to get some eyes on him based on this week's performance and the seasonal production that he has put forth. Other things I want to talk about from the first string team of the week. Carson Beck just continues to deliver. We're getting to the point now that the crescendo is building. And we talked about Jayden Daniels last week, who, with Shady Sanders going back to school, Jayden Daniels is going to be, I think, my QB3 in this draft class, just based on, what we've seen of him. But Carson Beck continues to climb. And if Georgia, goes on to the playoffs and Carson Beck performs well, I think there's a real chance he continues to elevate his stock into the top 5 quarterback mix. But I also think there's a real chance he goes back to school next year and then potentially just continue to build that stock up. And maybe we're even talking about high first round if he continues to build on that momentum. But we'll see. But Carson Beck continues to check off every box from probably an undrafted guy before the season started to a day 3 guy to an early day 3 to a day 2. And here we are now. Him really intriguing teams a lot, and we wonder if he could be a guy that pushes his way into that QB4, QB5 mix in this draft class. At the running back position, not much to say about Travion Henderson. I've kind of talked about it. We're starting to see that explosiveness a little bit more. We didn't see it his sophomore year a lot. We saw it a lot that freshman year. It's what got everybody excited about Travion Henderson. It's why he was RB1 in everybody's Devy ranks for a while at the running back position. We're starting to see that again. It's going to be really interesting to see if Travion Henderson can get loose at all against that tough Michigan defense this upcoming week. Excited for that matchup. Basically, one of the games of the year in college football. And then at the wide receiver position, listen, week after week, Odunze continues to live up to the billing. Prototypical outside X wide receiver, can win vertically down the field, but can win in the short to intermediate levels as well, can go up and high point it. To me, he's in that top 15-ish mix. If there was a team that said they like Odunze more than Keon Coleman or Malik Neighbors, I wouldn't be stunned. I think 2, 3, 4 is very interchangeable at this point. Odunze every week. Defenses give him a lot of attention. It doesn't matter the connection that him and Panics have. has been special since the first week of the season and throughout. If we take this to the second string team of the week at the quarterback position, it's Bo Nix out of Oregon, 406 yards, 6 touchdowns. Oregon destroyed all over Arizona State this past weekend. The second string running back of the week out of Kansas is Devin Neal, 138 yards and 3 touchdowns. Second string wide receiver of the week, Bo Nix's running mate there, Troy Franklin, 8 catches, 128 yards and 2 touchdowns. And the second string tight end of the week, back into the SS teams of the week. A couple weeks ago, came back from his injury. Brock Bowers out of Georgia, 7 catches, 66 yards and a touchdown. Again, locked in, top 10. The fact that he wanted to get back out there this year speaks volumes of his character, his personality, his work ethic. Whether it's the right decision for his draft capital and his draft stock, probably not. But you got to love the attitude and the persona he plays with, that he wants to be out there. He wants to try to help Georgia win another national title. And he didn't just, close up shop after that serious injury earlier in the year. In terms of Troy Franklin, I think we've talked about him a lot. He's in that mix now, late round 1 to somewhere in the middle of round 2. He could be wide receiver 5, wide receiver, depending on if, Igbuka and everybody comes out, maybe wide receiver 6, 7. I think that's where Troy Franklin is at the moment. Devin Neal, an interesting running back who I think has worked his way now into that round 3, round 4 mix, like so many other running backs in this class. It'll be interesting to see, again, how these running backs shake out. Excuse me, guys. I'm battling a little bit of a cough over the last couple of weeks, so you might hear me kind of cover up, and if I can get to the mute button fast enough, I will. But Devin Neal is definitely in the mix there to be somewhere in that round 3, round 4. So many of these running backs, I think that's going to be the sweet spot for these running backs. I think a lot of good running backs are going to get taken in round 3 through 5 in this year's draft class. And I think Devin Neal right there in the mix. Will still continue to see if anybody can push their way into the top 50, even in the round 2 territory. Some other things that stood out this past week in terms of storylines that I think were important to talk about. Let's talk about injuries first. Last week when I recorded this, I was unaware that Jonathan Brooks had torn his ACL and was going to be out the year. Real buzzkill on a guy who I had been talking about the last couple of weeks as a guy who had elevated his draft stock, that maybe he was in the mix to be RB 1, 2, or 3 in this draft class with, Trey Benson and Travion Henderson and Blake Corum. Although Jonathan Brooks was really building his draft stock to eventually be in that range, for him to tear his ACL really, hurts that draft stock, hurts, this year, Texas, he was an integral part of their offense. Really unfortunate. Hopefully he gets back healthy, and we'll see what the future, what that does for his draft stock, what that does for him, in terms of his collegiate career. But obviously a big injury there. And then the other one from this past week, one of my favorites, a guy who I had been talking about, I was much higher on than maybe the consensus. And I really wanted to see if he could win over more of the mainstream media and the NFL people. And that was Jordan Travis out of Florida State. Unfortunately, his season and his career at Florida State are over. So once he gets back from his injury, I think this kills all chances for Florida State to make a real run for the national title this year. I thought they could with Jordan Travis at the helm. I think that becomes almost very low odds. And now I think Jordan Travis coming back from his injury, not playing in these big moments, I think that definitely probably tickets him for day 3. But we'll see. We've seen a lot of guys in day 3 this past year get a chance. I have, the light left on for Jordan Travis. I'm intrigued by his skill set. I hope he gets drafted somewhere in round 4, round 5, and gets a chance to work his way to a backup. And then who knows, because there's a lot to his game that I really do find translatable to the next level. Jayden Daniels, we talked about him last week. What more is there to say? I know this week LSU was up against Georgia Southern or Georgia State. 413 yards, 6 touchdowns. 8 total touchdowns, almost had another 100 yards rushing. I think at this point, the Heisman is his. I think he's QB3 in this class. Friend of the show, regular guest in the past, John Lobb. I interacted with him on Twitter, and we were saying that he thinks he's QB3. He thinks he's going top 5. Listen, I think he's in there. I think he's in the mix. I think he's going to be QB3, and I think top 5, top 6 are definitely in play with, obviously Caleb Williams and Drake Maye and, the top tackles. There's two of them will probably be in the top 5, top 6 mix. And then obviously Marvin Harrison Jr. I think Jayden Daniels can push his way right into that mix in the top 5, top 6, top 7, top 8. I think there's a real chance Jayden Daniels can be going top 10, continues every week just to show that dual capability, that playmaking ability, and the growth and development he has shown throughout his collegiate career is really going to intrigue teams. He's ticketed to go to the Senior Bowl. I mean, I think he's going to win over a lot of people down there in Mobile as well. Drake Maye and Caleb Williams teams both suffered losses this week. Drake Maye, very undermanned against Clemson, 16 of 36, 209 yards. Definitely a little bit of a shaky performance, but you still see some special plays, some special throws. He had his first touchdown pass was unbelievable. The play that he made, Caleb Williams, he had 384 yards and only one touchdown. His one touchdown, showing off his special arm talent, his ability to flick the wrist, his ability to put, on the move, throw the ball vertically down the field, keep his eyes, and flick the wrist 50 yards in the air. So even in defeats, these guys continue to show some of their special traits and characteristics that I think make them slam dunk, top 1, top 2 picks in the NFL draft there when we get around to April of 2024. A couple wide receivers. I mentioned Malik Neighbors before, another 140 yards and 2 touchdowns, continues to just live up to the billing. I mentioned him again. I'll mention him again. Xavier Leggette continues, that momentum continues to build there for Xavier Leggette out of South Carolina. Listen, he was a guy that has really seized the opportunity when Juice Wells went down with an injury. Xavier Leggette has really risen up. And I think we're talking about a guy who's now in that day 2 mix for sure. Really talented player, Xavier Leggette, coming to the forefront for sure. And then some other guys, Emeka Egbuka came back 2 weeks ago. Didn't do much his first week back from injury, but this past week, 5 catches, 83 yards. It's going to be really exciting to see him the home stretch of this year, because when this year started, it was Marvin Harrison 1, Egbuka 2, and now, some people maybe I think have leapfrogged, Egbuka, between Rome Odunze and Malik Neighbors and Keon Coleman, and for some, maybe even Troy Franklin. But I think down the stretch of this year, if he has a good game against Michigan, if Ohio State ends up in the playoff, I think there's still time for him to work his way back up in that top 4 mix there, where right now the hot names are obviously Marvin Harrison, Neighbors, Odunze, and Keon Coleman. So we'll keep an eye on that now with him back in the saddle, and obviously the big game this upcoming week. If we take this to the Devy Slant, a couple guys that I want to make note. They're all big names, but I feel like it's time to check in a little bit on some of the top Devy prospects who are not draft eligible. At the running back position, Jaydn Ott, 166 yards, 1 touchdown. On the season, he's almost up to 1,200 yards and 11 touchdowns. With the Penn State duo, Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, kind of like splitting, I kind of think Jaydn Ott is going to enter the offseason as the number 1 underclassman, Devy running back, based on the guys that declare in terms of who's not draft eligible right now. I think Ott's going to be that guy that moves to the forefront on that list. The wide receiver position, listen, every year I feel like we have these elite guys. That's going to be the case again next year. Tet McMillan and Luther Burden. This past week, Tet McMillan of Arizona, 8 catches, 116 yards and 1 touchdown. Luther Burden from Missouri, 9 catches, 158 yards. McMillan's up to almost 70 catches for 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns. Luther Burden is closing in on 80 catches, over 1,100 yards and 8 touchdowns. Both of these guys are going to put up monster statistical years. They're going to go into next year as 2 more guys who have the capability, just like we're talking about the 4 this year, Harrison, Neighbors, Odunze, and Keon Coleman as top 15 players. I think Tet McMillan and Luther Burden are going to be 2 guys very much in that similar stratosphere next year, as well as being guys that we think can be middle of the first round or late top 10 picks. Both of them extremely talented players for sure. So again, just like to check in on some of the top Devy assets, Ott, McMillan, Burden, 3 of the best, 3 guys who I can't imagine next year we're not talking about them near the top of their positional ranks when we're talking about the 2025 NFL draft. If we take this over to the NFL side of it for segment 3 and 4 tonight, NFL rookie report. Listen, it's been the year of the rookie quarterbacks getting opportunities. I mean, the number that has played has been staggering. So rather than talk about CJ Stroud and his greatness and Bryce Young and him struggling and stuff like that, and Will Levis, had a rough week this week, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the other guys. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, it's now his show in Cleveland. Deshaun Watson's out the year. They made Thompson-Robinson the starter over PJ Walker. This past week, he leads a game-winning drive to lead to a field goal to beat Pittsburgh. It was a low-scoring game, but they let Thompson-Robinson throw it 43 times, 24, 43, 165 yards, added 20 yards with his rushing. It's going to be really interesting to kind of see. Cleveland's got an elite defense. They got a good run game. It's going to be interesting to kind of see what they let DTR do, how much they ask of him. I mean, 43 passes the first game he's playing. They're not going to baby him, it doesn't look like. So that's going to be fun to see down the stretch here. Can they make the playoffs with him? My hometown team, the New York Giants, undrafted, quarterback out of, formerly Syracuse, Illinois, Tommy DeVito, 246 yards and 3 touchdowns. It was a really good performance from him. Like, listen, there's still so many issues in terms of him, pre and post snap recognition, working his progressions quickly, the mental processing, all that stuff led to 9 sacks. A lot of them were on him. But listen, when he had time to throw the ball, he was willing to push it. He had a good yards per attempt, 246 yards, 3 touchdowns. It was an impressive performance from him. And then Aidan O'Connell, the season now for the Vegas team, is in Aidan O'Connell's hands. 271 yards, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions. But there's been a lot of buzz about Aidan O'Connell since, formerly many people thought he could be a day 2 guy. Then his last year in college didn't go great. He goes to early round 4. Vegas takes him. They raved about him in the summer, in preseason. There were a lot of positive vibes on Aidan O'Connell. We'll see if he's a guy who could potentially, get that long-term job there and get an opportunity. But it'll be interested to see what happens there. If we take this to the running back position, a couple things. Devon Achane left the game injured again. It's 50-50 whether he's going to play on the Black Friday game against the Jets this week. Obviously, a guy that size, that's concerned, but these have not really been injuries due to, physicality. These have been, knee injuries. Like his ability to cut and his speed that he moves and stuff like that, it could lead to some injuries. But I'm excited to still get him on the field. If anybody's starting to get overly concerned about the injuries, now would be a time to go aggressively, and I mean aggressively, try to get him on your dynasty team if people are worried about that. And then Zach Charbonnett, Kenneth Walker left the game injured. I'm not sure I heard any update on his status, whether or not he's going to miss any significant time. But Zach Charbonnett is going to be the guy there. This past week, 21 touches in that game against the Rams, 15 carries for 47 yards, 6 catches for 22 yards. Charbonnett is going to get a real opportunity here if Kenneth Walker is going to miss some time. Seattle's got 3 really tough opponents on the docket after that upset this past Sunday by the Rams over them. It's going to be interesting to kind of see if Seattle can keep the trajectory going towards the playoffs. They were aggressive at the trade deadline, trading a 2 and a 5 for Leonard Williams. But if they go on a little bit of a 3 or 4 game losing streak here, or lose 3 out of 4, it's going to really put a damper on their playoff chances. And now Charbonnett really gets put to the forefront here of whether he can carry that run game without Kenneth Walker, if Walker's going to miss time due to injury. If we take this to the pass catchers, Dalton Kincaid continues to see a lot of targets in that Buffalo pass offense now. He is easily past Gabe Davis to be the guy who's basically the second read, the guy they want to feed the ball to. If it's not Stephon Diggs, another 6 catches, 46 yards. And then the wide receiver position, let's start with the good. The good is Tank Dell continues to just be ridiculous. 8 catches, 149 yards, and 1 touchdown. Continues to win at all 3 levels of the field. Continues to win on the outside. Impressive performance by Tank Dell again. Jayden Reed, very versatile player. It was one of the most versatile wide receivers in this class. Inside, outside versatility. Could use him in a lot of different ways. This past week, 4 catches, 46 yards, 3 carries, 46 yards, and a touchdown. Jayden Reed making plays there for the Packers in their upset win this past weekend. Let's go to the bad. and that's Quentin Johnston. Everybody's seen the drop. If you're listening to the show, I'm sure you've seen the drop. It was as bad of a drop as you'll see in the National Football League. I was concerned about Quentin Johnston and his ability to translate to the next level, but under no circumstance did I expect it to go like this bad, in an offense that is got an elite level quarterback in Justin Herbert. The skies parted, basically. Mike Williams gets injured. Josh Palmer gets injured. So even if they didn't want to rush Quentin Johnston to a bigger role, he was thrust into that role. We see young wide receivers making an impact all over the National Football League. And Quentin Johnston continues to struggle, lining up in the wrong spots. I always had concerns about his route running, his understanding of route concepts. He didn't play up to his size. He didn't play up to those measurements. He dominated in the Big 12. He did a lot of stuff after the catch that just was there in the Big 12. And right now, there's got to be a lot of question marks. Chargers got to wonder if they really blew that. They had their choice there. Obviously, Smith-Njigba was taken. But unless I'm not remembering correctly, I'm pretty sure Zay Flowers was there. I'm pretty sure Jordan Addison was there. I know he had that run of 4 wide receivers in a row. I'm pretty sure it went JSN, Quentin Johnston, then Zay Flowers, and then Addison. You look at the guys, they might be saying, we could have got Josh Downs, we could have got Tank Dell, we could have got Jalen Hyatt, who, he hasn't made a lot of plays, but when he's been given opportunities, he showed that game-breaking ability to win vertically. Him and Justin Herbert would have been a thing of beauty. So a lot of things. I didn't expect it to be this bad. Hopefully he can turn it around. I don't want my pre-draft concerns ever to be right on a player in terms of him not working out. I hope that, any guy that I have question marks, I hope they basically shove it down my throat, to be honest with you. I want these guys to succeed. They worked their whole lives to get there. I had my questions about Quentin Johnston, and, right now it's looking a little bit like a Jalen Reagor, a little bit like a Kevin White situation. That's how bad it's been. There's still time. He's a young player. They probably didn't expect him to be pushed into the mix too much this year with Mike Williams and Keenan Allen when the year started, and another good young player in Josh Palmer, who I think they took in the 3rd round. But when you make an investment in round 1, you have high expectations. So I think they did anticipate maybe him developing into their number 1 wide receiver long-term once Keenan Allen slowed down, or right there with Mike Williams as a 1A, 1B type thing. So there's a lot to question right now. And, again, I continue to go back to why when I scout wide receivers, I'm looking for separation. I'm looking for route running, because those are the traits that stand out the most this year. And if you don't have them, I want to see elite ball skills. I want to see winning at the catch point. That's why I love Keon Coleman. I love Odunze. Are they the most refined route runners? No, not yet. But they dominate vertically down the field. They dominate at the catch point, going up and getting it. That's not how Quentin Johnston wins. It wasn't how he won in college. And right now, a lot of those concerns have came to fruition this year, and we'll see if he can turn it around. If we take this to the fantasy dynasty report for the week, couple of guys, couple sells, couple buys. It's harder to keep doing this week in and week out. Not a lot changes, but I did come up with some guys I'd be checking in on their value to buy, and I'd be checking in, on what I could possibly get for them in terms of selling them if I own them. So let's start with the 2 buys. The 2 buys are 2 wide receivers, Devonta Smith and Jalen Waddle. And the reason for it is neither one of them has lived up to expectations this year. In redraft leagues, they were both taken in the 2nd round. In dynasty leagues, Jalen Waddle was a top 10 wide receiver when the year started. I think Devonta Smith wasn't too far behind. And both of them really haven't lived up to expectations this year. Part of it is Waddle's been a little banged up. He missed some games. Tyreek Hill's been ridiculous. In the Philadelphia situation, great offense, a lot of mouths to feed. A.J. Brown's been unbelievable. Dallas Goedert, prior to his injury, had a couple big games. And it just didn't seem that it just kind of seemed that Devonta Smith was the guy left out at times. But both of these guys, to me, still belong top 12 to top 15 in wide receiver ranks. I still think their long-term trajectory is to be great NFL players. So if they're still not being valued by whoever owns them as top 15-ish wide receivers, I would be aggressively going to buy both. Former Alabama teammates, Devonta Smith, Jalen Waddle came into the draft together that year. Those would be my two buys for the week. Yeah, they're not going to come cheap or anything, but maybe their price is a little bit reduced than what it was just a couple of months ago. So those are two guys that I'd be looking to see if I can buy them right now. And then a couple players to sell. Let's start with the one that I would say most obvious sell. At this point, I mentioned it last week with Dameon Pierce that I was very concerned I'd get out now. That's kind of how I feel about Najee Harris, because the writing's been on the wall since the end of last year, then training camp. Jaylen Warren is just a more explosive player for them. And they invested a lot in Najee Harris, so they wanted to make it work. And you're going to still see him part of the team there. But slowly but surely, he's going to start losing work. And whether it's this year or whether it's next year, I just think his days of being anything close to a bell cow or a lead of a committee are probably gone. And again, the running back landscape in Dynasty is really dreadful, to be frankly honest with you. So if somebody's still valuing him as top 15, top 18, top 20, similar to what I said about Dameon Pierce last week, if you're not contending right now and you need whatever they can give you the rest of this year, get out now. Get a second-round rookie pick. Get a young player with some upside and get out now when they still have some value. My second and third sells, there's definitely more nuance. It's definitely more of a checking in process than a flat-out sell process. One is Trevor Lawrence. I've been on record. It seems like we're giving him a really long leash. And I love Trevor Lawrence coming out. And I want him to be successful. And I think we all kind of washed away his rookie year because of Urban Meyer and the disaster that he was in the NFL. And then last year we said, okay, this is really Trevor Lawrence's rookie year. And then we're like, okay, now we're ready to see the next jump. I don't feel like we've seen that next jump. I don't feel like we've seen them take the next step. Now, they won handedly this past weekend. That might be the time just to check, because I'm not sure anymore that Trevor Lawrence is going to reach that top 5, top 6 range where he was going to be right there in the mix with Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert. That even if he didn't get to the Mahomes, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts level, we kind of thought he was going to get to that Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow level and be right on par with those guys. I'm not sure anymore. I haven't seen anything from Trevor Lawrence yet to make me think that's his ceiling. But I still think his value and his perceived value is still pretty high. So check in. Maybe, obviously in 2 quarterback leagues or super flex, it's very hard to sell quarterbacks of this ilk. But if you could sell Trevor Lawrence and put yourself in position to get Drake Maye or Caleb Williams or even Jayden Daniels with his rushing ability, I might be willing to in the summer, in the offseason. If you're in a 1 quarterback league and you got another guy, I might be willing to sell him. Because I'm not sure he's going to be this fantasy. Even if I think he puts it together a little bit, I'm not sure we're going to see gaudy fantasy numbers. So Trevor Lawrence is the second sell. Third one is one that a player I love, and that's T. Higgins. The rest of this year is basically a lost year for T. Higgins. He's been hurt a lot. Who knows when he comes back? When he comes back, he doesn't have Joe Burrow. If Jake Browning or whoever ends up quarterbacking the Bengals the rest of the year has any good weeks, it's probably going to be via Jamar Chase. He's not going to be able to keep Jamar Chase and T. Higgins viable in fantasy this year. So I think this year is a lost year. So you're not getting anything the rest of this year. Anything that's going to help you win anything of significance. So even if you're a contender, you can think about this. In the offseason, he's a free agent. We sure are going to bring him back. He's going to want a monster deal. There's teams like Carolina that are desperate for a wide receiver 1 that are going to pay T. Higgins above and beyond probably his market value. And good for him to get it. But he goes somewhere else. Yeah, in theory, he might be the wide receiver 1. but he's going to get better defensive coverage. He's not going to have Jamar Chase drawing a lot of attention, and he's not going to have Joe Burrow. I mean, yes, you want to sit here and say if he ends up in Kansas City with Patrick Mahomes, sure. It doesn't seem like the Chiefs are going to go the expensive free agent wide receiver route. If they were going to do that, they probably would have found a way to make it work with Tyreek Hill. I think they feel like they could keep taking their stabs at it in the draft and let Mahomes do his magic. Now, we'll see if they come up short, if they can't make the Super Bowl, maybe they're aggressive. But even then, so I can see them being more aggressive in a trade for somebody than a monster free agent deal. So I doubt he's going to end up in a pristine situation. A team like Carolina probably is like an ideal situation for him to get his most money if he gets onto the open market. T. Higgins in Carolina does not inspire a lot of confidence in me right now compared to what we've seen in Cincinnati, the downgrade in the quarterback, the attention he would get. So he's still very high in dynasty rankings, and for good reason. He's a great young player. But if you can get somebody to really still give you that extreme value, I might consider it, because I do think most scenarios for T. Higgins will have his value decreasing in the offseason. Very few values will have it maintaining, and then even less will have it increasing. So look into maybe the sale price, what you can get for Trevor Lawrence, T. Higgins. I would almost really look to get out on Najee Harris, and I'd look to buy Devonta Smith and Jalen Waddle. So there's the NFL Dynasty Fantasy Report for this past week. So there it is, guys. Another NFL Draft Report, Devy Slant, NFL Rookie Report, and NFL Fantasy Dynasty Report in the books. Hopefully you enjoy the coverage we're providing here for you. It's almost, the pre-draft months are our favorite months here. We do so much great coverage, so many great guests. We're pushing closer towards the end of this college football season. As the college football season winds down, we kind of kick into gear even more here. So hopefully you continue to stick with us for all the great coverage we have, as the season winds down. And then as we turn to the All-Star circuit, the combine, and the pre-draft evaluation months for sure. If you're enjoying this content, get over to the website. SS Football is the fastest and easiest way to get there. Check out our premium content tab. For $9.99, you get access to all of our premium notebooks. It's the best way to help support the show. If you've bought it in the past, we hope you consider to purchase it again. If you've never bought it, but you've been a long-time listener, we please encourage you to try to give it a shot. It really does help us to continue to do what we do here at Saturday to Sunday. So, on behalf of our sound tech engineer, David Nicano, and myself, thank you for joining us, and we look forward next time taking you from Saturday to Sunday.